This is another example of a podcast that I had done with my students, with my middle school students, and it is a podcast that's based on a completion of reading the book Life as We Knew It by by Susan Beth Pfeffer. And she wrote this book about a girl. Her name is Miranda, and she experiences kind of a global event where an asteroid hits the moon and sends the Earth into basic frenzy. The tidal shift is affected, and there are tidal waves and earthquakes, and people act differently. And basically, it's kind of an end of the world scenario book, but it's told through the eyes of the main character Miranda, who is I believe, a freshman in high school when the book begins. And it's basically her trials and tribulations of trying to survive in this new world before the life she had when she knew it before. So it's really taught in conjunction with a science teacher, and we had where the students had to learn the different phases of the moon and some earth science that was involved, and then the language arts side of it also was where I kind of took the podcast um, into the assignment. So really, what I had the students do is I had them create a podcast on this. The podcast is a little bit more involved than some of the other podcasts that I did because it involves the students not only using their voice to make the connections and provide information for the other students in the classroom and myself to assess their knowledge, but it also required them to choose a song to underlay in the podcast. So they needed to choose an appropriate song that would connect with the book. And I thought this was a neat idea. I actually gotten the idea at a national middle school conference, not necessarily to make the podcast, but for students to be able to make connections and support their reasoning for why they chose a pop song or a particular song um, to make the connections with the book. So I kind of opened it up for the students to kind of see what connections that they could make. I kind of gave them a little bit of a scenario as to say, okay, if this were to be a movie, what would the soundtrack be, and how would you connect it to the book? So I allowed them to either make a song that would make a connection with Miranda from the main character from Life as We Knew It, or they could take it and say, from the lyrics in the song or the way the mood in the song went to the theme as Life as We Knew It. Or if they wanted to, they could maybe say, okay, this is a particular scene, and this is the song that I would play for that scene if I were making a movie of Life as We Knew It. So it's kind of a neat way of different kind of options the students might have to make this podcast. So the process for this is for the students to write their script first. And I find that a lot of times, if it's something very specific that I want the students to say, as any other part of the writing process and part of the speaking process, we need to have something to say. As a script, kind of a bullet pointed script, whether there be note cards. And in this case, it was just basically a 3 paragraph script for them to read as they recorded their podcast. Um, Sometimes, though, however, if I want to get just an opinion or I want to have the students just give me a kind of um, an on the fly response, that's an okay way to do a podcast, but I like to have them scripted for the most part. So after they wrote that, they needed to in their explanations, they need to explain why they chose the song and connected the tone and the mood of the song to the book, and then explain basic connections to the book. So what I needed them to do first was to bring a hard copy of the song so that we could use that song and put the song onto Audacity. So this was kind of a technical feat. So we actually took a day or two to do this. So it was a timely process, but the products were well worth it in the end. So what we did then was we recorded the script as an Audacity file, and after that we kind of like underlaid the music as a bumper. So we put the bumper at the beginning and at the end of the podcast. And what I did was I made the song no more than 10 seconds in length, so that the students weren't infringing on any copyright laws, because this was going to be posted on my website as a place for the students to go and evaluate each other after all of them had been created. So the total length of this was about 2 to 5 minutes for each one, and I felt that that script really did fit that, and most students were able to do that within the parameters of those that time frame. So some of the objectives for this were simply to basically get the kids to speak and listen, and that's part of the Common Core standards, is to get them to kind of analyze things and basically explain how their ideas to make the connections with the book and the song. To also, when they evaluate each other, to kind of really see if they made the connection with the song that they chose. Also, the students needed to be able to make sure that they could identify with the basic elements of the story. So if they were choosing the theme of the story, or how it connects with the main character, or even the scene, like from the plot. So that's all for the podcast on Life as We Knew It. And I hope you got some good ideas out of that. I thought that was an interesting podcast to complete.